Hey, how's it going? You are here for Heavy Art Talk, and it's your host, Lee, like usual. And today, I'm pumped. I have Eric Sahlsten joining me. Eric has really cool pen and ink style. I've been familiar with his work for about the last year. Always been really kind to me online, and just really fan of like how detailed and like he draws from like a lot of really cool natural elements, a lot of stuff from wildlife. But in terms of clients, he's worked with really big bands, including Alice in Chains, Smashing Pumpkins, as well as Amenra, Kvelertak, High on Fire, and some others. We'll dive into those pieces. Without further ado, Eric, what's happening, man?
Hey, how's it going, Lee? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, dude. Well, what have you been listening to lately?
I feel like I've always kind of got the usual bands kind of constantly in rotation. A lot of Crowbar lately.
Okay.
One of my favorites. Death metal, I'd say, is usually staple. I'm from Tampa, Florida, so growing up and getting into all that kind of stuff, getting into like Death and then Morbid Angel, and finding out that those bands were from my hometown was pretty cool. Still a huge Morbid Angel fan for sure. Yeah, a lot of Bolt Thrower, just the classics. And then, yeah, I mean, heavy stuff's always in the rotation, but when I'm working, honestly, unless it's for a specific band, in which case I'll try to listen to that band while working on a piece for them. But generally, when I'm working, I'm listening to a lot of like ambient and kind of atmospheric stuff. Honestly, I find lyrics can be kind of distracting sometimes when I'm working. And just the more like droney ambient stuff, I can just kind of zone out, so to speak, and just kind of get into that flow state a little better.
Like sun and earth and that kind of droney stuff.
No, not even like droney metal per se, but I don't know, a lot of like, I don't even know what you'd call it, like neoclassical maybe, or like more like atmospheric piano stuff or like cello stuff. Just yeah, I don't know, like cinematic, I guess I'd consider it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff like that.
No, I know what you mean. Like, I find a lot of times metal isn't what I want to listen to when I'm actually like drawing. A lot of times because either the vocals or the energy. Sometimes, like with inking, for instance, sometimes I want a very steady, patient hand. You know what I mean? And if I have something that's amping me up too much, that's not what I need in that moment. When I'm like sketching and I can be messy and stuff, metal's totally fine. But I do like try to be cognizant of that,
Yeah, I get that. I didn't really think of it, but yeah, if you're working on like a really minute area and there's like blast beats going crazy in the background, it can be quickens your pulse a little bit when you're trying to like relax and calmly ink this little area. So yeah, I hear you for sure.
So like growing up in Tampa, then, I mean, do you think like that, because, Death, Morbid Angel, like they're, sometimes like pinnacle or peak would be like early to like mid 90s. Do you still feel like that death metal energy is there in Tampa, like firsthand? Or do you think if you were anywhere else in the country, you would still kind of have that same connection to it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'd I'd like the music either way, because I'm out in Denver now. I've been here for, actually this month will be 5 years
Okay.
out here. But yeah, I'm not sure how much of like a death metal scene Tampa currently has. I mean, I think the influence is kind of always sort of there in a latent way, but yeah, I mean, the music's appealing regardless. But I think being a kid and like, getting into thrash metal first, like I think Master of Puppets was literally the first metal song that I have like conscious memory of ever hearing.
Nice.
And I think obviously that's the gateway band for a lot of people. But starting out from kind of a thrash base and then finding bands like Sepultura that are a little heavier, and then getting into like Pantera and stuff, and then slowly finding death metal, and just, when you're first getting into heavy music, you're kind of just constantly seeking heavier and more extreme
Yeah.
sounds. That's kind of what's fun about it as a kid, or at least for me. I kind of miss that just like wave of discovery in like a very compressed amount of time. But
Yeah.
yeah, getting into heavier stuff and then finding a band like Morbid Angel, then I don't know, just finding out that they were, practicing in a storage unit 20 minutes from your house is pretty cool.
There is like a connection. I know what you mean. Like, I spent a lot of years in Athens, Georgia, and
Yeah.
that has not a metal scene per se, but they have a very signature music scene that's
Mm-hmm.
known in like the indie rock scene. So when I was there, I could see that history and how it weaves to current day. So I know what
Yeah.
you mean.
And just kind of, I mean, it's Florida's kind of seemingly an unlikely place for that kind of music to kind of take hold. It's kind of bizarre in a way. Um, sunshine and beaches, and it's just this brutal music, but the heat gets to you. It does things to your brain, so maybe that's it. But yeah, it's cool, and still one of my favorite bands to this day. So
Definitely. How do you see like Tampa being different than Denver now that you've been in Denver for about 5 years?
different in what sense? Like
Culturally living there, just kind of like the general feeling of like the population.
it's definitely different. I moved out here. I knew I didn't want to live in Florida my entire life. I was kind of leaving a job and just felt like it was a good moment to kind of move somewhere else, and I always kind of wanted to, and moved out here for the mountains. Just kind of wanted to change the scenery,
Mhm.
and now being out here for 5 years now, I really miss the ocean and the coastline, which is just how it goes.
Grass is greener, huh?
You want what you don't have,
Yeah.
I guess. But yeah, I mean, Denver's super cool. Obviously, a great heavy music scene. You've got Chemist, Primitive Man, Wayfarer, Blood Incantation. A lot of those bands, which I didn't even know were from here until I moved out here.
Hmm.
So it's. Florida gets skipped, unfortunately, on a lot of tours. Especially when I was going to school in Tallahassee, I was driving up to Atlanta all the time for shows, or Birmingham or Mobile, just because Florida is a super long state.
Hmm.
So a lot of bands just skip it, which I kind of understand. So being out here, honestly, one of the best things is just being in a bigger hub where shows are reliably coming through. So
Definitely.
just seeing a ton of shows out here, which is super nice. Um, yeah.
You have a favorite venue in Denver?
As far as like smaller kind of clubs go, the High Dive is a great little spot. The Gothic Theater, which is like south and Inglewood, technically. It's a really good spot, really good sound, and they've got some it's a bit bigger, so they have some bigger bands, but they book a lot of heavy stuff. Yeah, there's just a ton of venues, which is nice because in Florida, that's another thing. A lot of the like smaller clubs and mid-sized venues have kind of, especially I moved out here from St. Pete, just across the bay from Tampa, in 2019, and since I've left, like a lot of those small clubs have closed.
Oh, really?
So it was getting skipped on tours to begin with, and now there's even less places to play for like smaller regional bands, which is a shame. So it's just nice. There's a venue here, for just about everything. But in the last couple of years in Tampa, there's been like kind of a more DIY resurgence, and some smaller spots are starting to open back up in response. So I just hope that continues.
Definitely. When you were coming up to Atlanta, then were you going to the old Masquerade location? Like, was that where you would see shows?
Yeah, I think the first time I went to the old Masquerade was when would that have been? 2011, maybe 2012.
Yeah.
It was the first time seeing it was High on Fire, Doom Riders, and Kvelertak.
Oh,
That was the
cool.
first time seeing any of those bands, and still to this day, like one of the best shows I've been to, one of the best lineups. And then I went there for Wrecking Ball Fest in 2015. And then I've been to the new Masquerade a couple times in the last, I don't know, 5 years, which is cool. It's a good spot, but I miss the old one with like a castle or something. It was pretty sweet.
Yeah. floors would like bounce, like it was kind of freaky at a certain point.
That High on Fire show, there was another show going on upstairs, and like you could hear it pretty well, and like the ceiling, I mean, I'm not sure if it was just my imagination, but it looked like it was like visibly sagging.
Yeah.
I was like, this seems safe, it's fine. But yeah, it was a cool spot for sure.
It's the land of metal tradition, to talk about the old Masquerade. That's like a very common conversation whenever you go to shows, like your favorite Masquerade memory and stuff.
Never forget.
Exactly. What were you about to say?
I'm trying to think of the other venue, like a bigger theater. I think the first time, maybe the first time I saw Mastodon, Tabernacle, is that a venue? Yeah, with like the painted ceiling and everything. I don't know, it was like a big hall, but it was super
there's
nice.
two. There's Fox Theater, which they played in 2017. It was October 2017. I have this shirt from it and wear it all the time. Nice. That one has it's kind of like Arabic looking. Okay. Tabernacle is like an old church.
Yeah, that's the Tabernacle's where it was.
Tabernacle, got it.
It was them, Gojira, and Kvelertak actually opened that show as well.
Yeah, that's a sick show.
Yeah, it was great.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, you've been any good stuff in Atlanta recently?
Yes. I go through a period of going to a lot of shows. The last show I went to that blew my socks off was Horrendous and Tumult.
Nice.
First of all, like killer bands, and from what I could tell, really nice people in both bands too, which I think carries a lot of weight. But you could just feel the energy, and like Horrendous, if you ever get a chance to see them live, they really bring it. Excellent live performers. They had a great stage presence. You can just like feel their, I don't mean to sound cheesy, but like you can feel like their friendship and like their chemistry on stage. And like, to me, it's infectious. Like I'm all for like death metal bands, like going on stage and they're like trying to be intimidating and scary, right? Like if that's your vibe, do that. That's your performance. But for them, it was like watching like Ozzy's backing band, but in a death metal form. You know what I mean? Like that was more of their energy live, and I liked it a lot. So
that's cool.
Whatever's authentic for you, but I don't like it when bands just like stand there and the music stands for itself. I want movement. I want to see the passion when you play.
Yeah. It's a fine line with like the spooky atmosphere thing. Like I can appreciate it, and like, I mean, part of why I like death metal, I think metal in general, I mean, there is a lot of like theatricality to it in a sense, and I kind of appreciate that mystique sometimes, but it can also seem like really ham-fisted and cheesy if it just seems like an act. I mean, I guess it's all an act, but I don't know. It's a fine line between being spooky and it's like, all right, like we know you're serious, like just play the songs,
I think also too, it's like how the band carries themselves. Like, do they seem confident? Are they doing good in between song transitions? Are they like, even before they get on, they start performing, when they're on stage and they're just like setting up their equipment and stuff, does it seem like they know what they're doing? Like, I don't mean to be like a harsh critic, but like that's part of the experience to me. Like I literally watch bands set up. I watch like how they talk. I watch how they talk to the sound guys. Like all this stuff's fascinating to me because everything beyond the music, the business, the production, the transportation, all that to me is fascinating. The whole thing. So to me, all of it is looped into the show. How you carry yourself at the merch stand, you know what I mean? Like how you're displaying it up. And it's not to mean like I have like the highest standards ever. I see the effort, and I see bands that are really trying when no one's looking, or they think no one's looking,
Right.
Yeah. Not to go on a giant tangent, but like,
no,
that's all part of it,
Yeah. Just attention to detail.
Yeah. It's, something I'm really passionate about. And I can tell you obviously are too, man. If you're willing to drive, freaking 5 hours to go see a show,
Oh, I've made some odysseys to see music because I want to, but like, I don't know, a lot of people a lot of people get like bummed out. They're like, oh, like this band's not playing my exact city. It's like, well, you got to go drive this. If you're really into the band, like, make, whatever, obviously work and other circumstances permitting, like if you can, if the only factor is sitting in the car for a few hours, like you got to go to the show sometimes. And I like being on the road. So I like making a trip out of it. So
Definitely. Well, imagine some people want to hear us talk about art a little bit too.
I guess so.
So when it comes to, like art and illustration, when you were like a kid, do you recall what inspired you, or like kind of what was that experience like finding drawing and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've been drawing for as long as I can remember. I don't know, what age it exactly started, but since I was a little kid, I've always just been sketching with pencils or crayons or whatever. Probably crayons first, and then pencils and ballpoint pens and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like earliest influences. I mean, like the first book series I ever got into was Redwall, and I just remember seeing, one of the covers, one of the big, plastic sleeved hardcovers in the school library, and it was like a mouse, with a sword on top of a castle. And I was just like, that's awesome. Because I mean, I've always, whatever, loved animals and nature and whatnot, and then also loved medieval stuff. So seeing that cover, I just immediately was drawn to it. And, one of the first books I probably ever read or like chose, on my own, and then got pretty obsessed with that series, and, read as many of them as I could find at school. And then like, getting into cartoons and stuff as a kid. Like I used to be really into Dragon Ball Z and Gundam Wing and stuff like that. Like I feel like a lot of my earliest drawings were probably like Dragon Ball Z characters or like Gundams. And I used to buy the models, like the little plastic Gundam models, and put
chiseled triceps, chiseled hair,
just insane musculature. And yeah, just everything's like angular and pointy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, drew Vegeta 20 times, and then, I was super obsessed with Star Wars as well. I mean, Star Wars was a big one. I mean, I was obsessed.
Well, like me and you are similar age. Episode 1 came out when we were like 10 or so, Yeah,
it was a momentous occasion.
The pod racer scene still holds up. I like that. I like that part.
Phantom Menace is not bad. I mean, they're all flawed.
It's very nostalgic.
Like, yeah, I mean, it's at the point where like I don't know if I can divorce the nostalgia from the product because it is so intensely nostalgic. I mean, obviously, like there's some really goofy stuff in those movies.
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, because when that come out, 99, 98?
2000, yeah, 99, 2000, yeah.
Yeah, so I was 9 years old. Yeah, I mean, there's a picture somewhere of me and my younger brother, who's 4 years younger. I think he has like a Jar Jar Binks shirt on, and I've got like a Qui-Gon Jinn tie dye or something when we went to the premiere. And yeah, I mean, it was great. And then me and like a really old friend of mine that I've known since second grade, and grew up next door to, my buddy Carl. We had very similar interests. I feel like when we became friends, we were all like into all the same kind of stuff, and he drew as well. And so we just used to, I mean, no telling how many stormtroopers and Boba Fett's I've drawn, and from ages, whatever, 6 to 10, 6 to 12. So yeah, I mean, Star Wars was a big one, and I had all those like, I don't know, at one point when I was younger, I probably wanted to be a concept artist at some point, because I used to buy all those like art of books.
Oh yeah,
for Star Wars, and like, when the Lord of the Rings movies came out, because the movies were my introduction to Lord of the Rings. I was, like 10 when Fellowship came out, so I wasn't quite reading those books yet. And then stuff like Warcraft and Starcraft. I used to be really into video games when I was younger. So all those like concept art books for Warcraft and Starcraft, I was obsessed with all that stuff. And still own a lot of those books and still flip through them from time to time, because I love seeing stuff in its sort of like nascent state. And I love seeing like, I mean, obviously it's concept art, so the initial concepts and stuff, but sometimes like you see designs that you think are way cooler than what got chosen. It's cool to see like, all the stages of development for some of that stuff. So I just always found that fascinating. But yeah, I'd say like Star Wars, Redwall, Lord of the Rings, stuff like that was like the major influences early on, and then a little later finding D&D, and I think the first like miniature I bought was like a D&D sorcerer or something, and then quickly finding Warhammer, and again my buddy Carl, and he had a younger brother that was about the same age as my younger brother, and we all kind of got into that stuff at the same time and got super into Warhammer and Warhammer 40K and collecting the miniatures, and I painted miniatures for, I don't know, 10 years growing up. And we played the game occasionally. It was, the rule book's like that thick, and when you're like 12, you're like, I don't know what any of this means.
Yeah, this guy looks cool. Yeah.
It was kind of complicated, so we kind of winged the game. But I always just like enjoyed the hobby side of it more, and collecting the figures and painting them and stuff. But yeah, I mean, all that. This was like late '90s, early 2000s. That roster of artists that Games Workshop had at the time is still some of my favorite stuff. I mean, like Adrian Smith, Carl Kopinski, Ian Miller, John Blanche, stuff like that. I mean,
yeah, all legends, and all distinct different styles too.
Yeah, super different styles, and like, yeah, the art was just so crazy then. Like, looking at the stuff now, it's so like watered down and kind of tame, and I don't know, compared to then, it's like super chaotic, and you could tell they had a lot of creative freedom with stuff.
Yeah,
you're seeing the same characters represented in kind of like very different ways depending on the different artist styles. Yeah, I mean, seeing some of that stuff as like a 10-year-old, it's kind of burned into my brain. Some pretty gnarly images, I guess, to see when you're a little kid. Everything's got skulls and severed heads, and
I mean, I remember, yeah, it was like the forbidden fruit. That, and I really liked the Spawn toys and that imagery. You know what I mean? Because you go to Toys R Us, there's all the Pokemon and all that kind of stuff. But then over in the side, it's like, oh, what are these Spawn toys? Oh my god, look at the level of detail on these things.
Yeah, I had a few of those. I don't know if I have them anymore, but there was a Spawn like samurai, like a zombie samurai.
Yeah.
With this crazy sword and like this super spiky helmet, and like just the actual helmet on the toy was like actually sharp and like seemed dangerous. The whole thing was just like covered in spikes, which same with Warhammer, all the chaos stuff. It's just like everything is covered in spikes. And as a kid, I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how much like overt influence that stuff has on like the work I'm doing now, but I think in the back of my mind, like that's kind of the foundation for like a lot of the stuff I'm into. And maybe subconsciously I'm always kind of falling back on, because a lot of the stuff in the rule books too was all monochrome. So I spent a lot of time as a kid just looking at monochrome artwork, which is maybe why I'm drawn to like black and white stuff primarily. I think that probably is part of it.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I can see that. But I mean, at the very least, it sounds like your primary influences growing up and stuff were from illustration rather than fine art. Because like some folks, they like, I don't know, man, they get really interested in like art class in school, like public or private school, and then they follow that path. Maybe you did, but for me, I never felt like that was really my way. It was always drawing with my friends and making up Pokemon and drawing Yu-Gi-Oh characters and shit like that,
For sure, I'm the same way. I keep bringing it back up, but my neighbor and our little brothers, like we all drew a ton, and they had like this huge square like coffee table, and we used to spend hours around that thing and just like inventing creatures and characters and in spaceships. We this was probably, I don't know, maybe like third or fourth grade. But we invented this like world called Gargantia and drew all these like weird creatures that populated this world. And I don't know, I was really like, as a kid,
you should redraw them now with your skills, man. That'd be cool. Find those drawings, redraw them.
Me and my friend literally talked about this not that long ago, and that'd be kind of funny to do. And I think he's still got a giant manila folder somewhere with a lot of these drawings, because just like hundreds of pages of just crazy, bizarre things. But it would be funny to rehash some of that stuff now. Just make it super detailed.
I didn't mean to cut you off. I think that would be cool to see.
Yeah, maybe it'll be the next project. We'll see.
What about like you obviously have an interest in like wildlife and drawing things from nature and stuff. When do you think that like began for you? Or is it kind of intertwined with, drawing fantasy stuff, bridging reality and fantasy?
Yeah, probably just that. I don't know. I've always just been interested in nature and just, I don't know. It sounds kind of weird, but yeah, I just love the natural world, I guess. Especially with like Redwall, just like forest creatures and medieval stuff. And I've always liked that kind of fantasy aspect and kind of escapist aspect to stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. I've probably been focusing on pen and ink specifically for the last 6 or 7 years. And I don't know, from the get-go, was always just kind of incorporating natural elements into stuff, just because there's always a lot of inspiration from the natural world. You can think of some novel shape or texture, and it all pretty much exists in nature in some form. And even especially being out here in Colorado and just like going on hikes in the mountains and stuff, and just whatever, stumbling across bones and weird trees and rocks and just like crazy forms everywhere you look, and just drawing inspiration from your kind of surroundings. It's right there. It's easy to pull from, and I don't know, maybe in like an increasingly technological kind of society, or I don't know, we're so inundated with tech and staring at screens all the time. So I feel like just sticking to natural forms and things from nature is just kind of a way of just like staying rooted and just kind of reconnecting with that aspect of things.
Definitely.
And but basically just drawn to the forms, and yeah, I don't know. I guess that's about it.
Yeah, you're drawn to it because you're drawn to it. Sometimes it's as simple as that. But yeah. I think you added a lot of color there. When it comes to your art process nowadays, is your goal to try to keep as much as possible, pre-computer, basically? Like, some of your stuff, you're doing some like colors and adding stuff probably because the client wants it or something. But what does your approach typically look like there?
Generally not using a ton of color, and not really because I dislike color necessarily. I just think, I don't know, I feel like a lot of stuff doesn't need it. And again, like going back to the Warhammer, like a lot of that art was graphite or like ink washes and primarily monochrome. I've just been drawn to that, and then later later influences, like really love medieval woodcuts and engravings and stuff like that. And I don't know, I'm just really drawn to monochrome work and just like black line work and dot work. So unless something calls for it, I generally like keeping colors pretty minimal. I use a lot of like metallic gold kind of flourishes for stuff. It's just like a little, a little pop of color. But yeah, it kind of depends on the project too. Some stuff, calls for color and some stuff doesn't. But all that, when I do add color, it's all digital. I'll do that in Photoshop, but generally that's about it. Keeping everything pretty analog. Everything starts as a pencil sketch, just kind of blocking out, rough forms and trying to like sort of map out value structure, and then just going straight in with the ink. And then, even once it's scanned in, like, unless there's some sort of glaring issue, or if like there's, an ink spot where it shouldn't be, like, I'm really not cleaning stuff up much, if at all, on the computer, just kind of leaving it as is. Scanning in black and white, so generally not picking up any pencil marks if there are some, and then just knocking out the background. But just keeping things pretty basic.
Is there a part of the art creation process you enjoy the most? Like, do you enjoy sketching more than inking, or I mean, they all have like, pros and cons in terms of kind of what energy you're putting out there, but sometimes people have a favorite.
Yeah, honestly, the sketching phase is pretty rough for me. I don't love it. I love just the initial kind of like concept phase and just
Yeah.
like running through ideas. And I feel like I've always got to kind of get through 3 or 4 bad ideas and kind of. I think my initial impulse is always to do too much and to try to want to cram too much into a piece.
Yep.
And then just sit with it for a day and look at it the next day and just have like, all right, we can like get rid of this. It's just kind of paring it down to like what's the core idea or subject matter I'm trying to get across. So yeah, I mean, I love doing like research and like just looking at stuff online, and I feel like a lot of, if not most, my concepts are rooted in either nature or some sort of mythological frame. Constantly going to like mythology and old stories for kind of the basis of a lot of ideas.
Hmm.
So yeah, I love that just initial kind of discovery and research. And then when it comes time to actually sketch it, I mean, like doing a thumbnail sketch for approval, that's fine. And that's usually pretty quick and you can keep it pretty loose. But when it comes time to actually lay down the pencil lines for the piece I'm going to ink, I actually find that the most difficult step because you've kind of got to make sure everything's proportionally accurate and you've got to make sure you have good bones to work off before you start inking. So to me, that's honestly like one of the hardest parts is getting the final sketch to a place that I'm happy with and that looks, that's they're never too detailed. I keep it pretty basic. It's not like I'm adding value or anything, but it needs to be together enough that I'm not lost while I'm inking and I have some sort of, logical guidepost. And then obviously like putting down the first ink marks is always kind of stressful because once the black ink's on the page, it's on the page. So there's always kind of that like jittery phase for the first hour or two, like getting the initial marks down. But then once you're into inking, I feel like you just kind of go on autopilot after a while and you just kind of fall back into that, muscle memory, so to speak. So the inking is, it's time consuming and kind of tedious, but I'm not thinking about it much. Like once I'm far enough in and I'm kind of comfortable, which always takes a bit. Every single piece is a challenge. It's like every time I sit down and draw, I'm like, can I do this? Like,
Yeah.
Do I know how to draw?
Dude,
like,
I know exactly what you mean.
I think a lot of people think like, especially non-artist friends I've talked to, like, oh, you just sit down at your desk and just start drawing and just crank out like pieces. I'm like, after a week of procrastinating and like psyching myself out and then like finally putting the marks down, it's like every time it's a struggle. Even looking at old work, I'm like, can I replicate this? And like, can I do this again? It's always kind of a challenge. And then once you're a few hours in, then yeah, muscle memory kind of takes over and it's just like, oh yeah, I can do this. But it's always, every single piece is daunting initially when you're first starting, at least for me.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I can relate on every single one of your points. The construction of like the drawing is definitely the hardest part. I mean, because obviously art is subjective, but I do believe there is some objectiveness of like that looks off, that looks good, that looks whatever. And it's like trying to get it just right, like that Goldilocks zone, especially when you're doing it and you can't, move things around digitally. There's a lot of erasing unless you're a savant. It's a lot of erasing, and I think a common misconception is that I think most artists and illustrators can relate to this, that it doesn't really ever get easy. You get better. I mean, I get better every time. And I think my end result often looks good. I have enough confidence to say that. But there's always those points when it's like, yeah, this is fucking hard. And just because it's hard doesn't mean I can't do it. But it does take time and a lot of energy and a lot of doubt to push through every single time, no matter how good you get,
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And to a point, I mean, obviously, like once you have enough work behind you, like you obviously can fall back on that, and like
Yeah.
it does build confidence in a sense. You're like, I've done this before, I can do it again. But initially, yeah, it's always hard, and there's always a lot of planning, and if you're not actively engaged with the process, like you do have to kind of critically think about a lot of stuff, and like this, I mean, because inking and sketching are two very different things. Like
Yeah.
inking feels more like craftsmanship. Like honestly, like I'm a stronger inker than drawer or illustrator, if that makes any sense. Like
I think in comic book terms, penciler versus inker, I think that
yeah,
division has helped out my art, just like thinking about it differently. But yeah, go
yeah.
ahead. I can agree.
But that sketching phase, like getting a good sketch and dynamic sketch down before ink hits the page is super difficult. And they're kind of two separate practices in a sense. Because I mean, once you have the shapes blocked out and you have an idea of where the values are going, it is kind of just like a more methodical, or at least for me. I mean, it depends on your inking style, I guess. Like if you're, I'm not doing like super bold, energetic strokes necessarily. I'm just kind of which it's yeah, it's kind of autopilot in a sense. I'm not like it doesn't really feel like drawing. It's just like it's more like sculpting. Like you're sculpting this 2D object with dots and values and trying to get the values right. But yeah, I mean honestly
You
trying
do lean
trying
a
to
little more
focus.
stippling, don't you? Like in terms of your rendering style.
Yeah, I mean at least I've kind of been focusing on that. I don't know, maybe the last 2.5 years. So I feel like when I started out, I really I was really focused on like cleanliness and pulling really clean lines and like doing more hatching and cross hatching.
Yeah.
Um, and honestly, it just kind of stressed me out. Like with the hatching stuff and like bold black lines, there's so much writing on each individual mark, and
Yeah.
if something's off, like it looks off really quickly. And stippling is definitely more time consuming and a little more tedious, but there's less writing on each. I mean, it's so many marks. You have a little more wiggle room. Like you put a few dots down, like it's fine. You can blend it into something or cover it up. It's not like it's a bold black hatch mark. And like once that's there, it's there. So the stippling, it can be, I don't know, monotonous and also meditative at times. But I've kind of leaned into that for the textural effects for sure. I kind of like the softer textures, but also it's like it's sort of a less stressful way of working for me.
Mm.
I can just slowly build up texture and value, but there's not so much at stake with individual like marks, I guess. But yeah, I mean, I feel like in general, I've been gravitating more and more towards, or at least the art that I'm drawn to personally, that I like more these days is more kind of soft and atmospheric and like a little less defined, I guess.
Hmm.
I don't know. With the hatching stuff, I love cross hatching, and it's super difficult. But I don't know. I feel like the work I want to create now, I want it to be a little softer, not just like black lines on white paper, which is still very much a work in progress and trying to figure out how best to do that. Um, yeah, the
I
sibling the
always
sibling
like
stuff's
hearing
cool.
about this stuff. I like hearing people's preferences, you know?
Yeah, which
Is it's
now
not.
it's
Go ahead.
sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that, and I'm speaking for myself, and you just tell me if you agree, but like the stuff that I want to create or that I really, really look towards doesn't mean that everything else that isn't stuff I don't like. It's just,
Yeah,
there's just those things that like really like kind of strike a chord with you. Like for me, I want to try to, I feel like I look at some of my work and there's maybe too much middle value. I'm trying to get more high contrast, more
mhm.
dramatic blacks and starker whites slowly. I don't want to completely lose what I'm doing, but that's what I'm really drawn towards right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that kind of Mike Mignola, like really stark kind of like look, I think is really cool.
for
And I'll
sure.
never go that far probably, but um,
I've kind
just
of
something powerful about that.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because like stuff like that that's super bold on its face can look like simpler, but it's not at all. And like
Scary.
leaning into like such high contrast value like that, and just putting in like huge blacked out areas to do it well and convincing is actually super difficult. I feel like I've felt the same way. I want to do richer blacks and like more like solid black areas. I haven't I don't know how much I've actually successfully done any of that because and just getting better at value structure in general, it's super difficult because I feel like I have a compulsion to fill every inch of negative space with marks, and like I have to consciously rein that in and fight that every single time I do a piece. And there's just like some white spot. I'm just like, my brain's like, fill it with dots. I'm like, no, just leave the white space. Because I don't know, I just want to fill the whole page with marks, and then you completely destroy your value structure. So I always have to kind of keep that in the back of my mind to like just leave more white space and like lighter highlights and deeper shadows. Trying to slowly get better at that. Hopefully, we'll see.
Sounds like we're both kind of on a similar path, but in slightly different directions. The other thing you mentioned that resonates with me a ton is you're talking about like when you're like sketching and you're like, that element isn't necessary, cut that out, like kind of the simplification of your drawings or just getting it down to the core. That's all I'm trying to focus a little more on as well. And I'm finding like I usually have I use a light board for my final. So I have a sketch and I just have like this sketch paper that I just kind of throw everything at it. And that's kind of where I get all my wild ideas out. And then I like figure out, is that necessary or not? Like I'm working on one right now where I'm trying to go too crazy with the frame border. It's like, I love really crazy wild shapes, but it's like, is it a distraction or is it supporting it? And I go crazy maximalist and I subtract. I'm like, oh, that's too much subtraction. So it's like trying to find that right Goldilocks moment, man. It does feel like that for me when I'm drawing a lot. With that process you were talking about where it's just trying to get the proportions right and stuff. Like I feel like I'm just like Goldilocks, just like it's this intangible thing that I'm like, it's right now. It's capturing that compositional energy that is hard to say why it works, but it does. And I'm like chasing that all the time. And then when I don't have it, it's very frustrating. But when you're inking, you don't have to focus about that as much, like you're talking about.
Yeah, because like once the shapes are blocked in, then you're just filling them in, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, like sounds like the same way. I don't really have formal training. So it's just kind of a gut feeling. You're just like, this looks right now, or like right enough to where like it's not jumping out at me. So hopefully it doesn't jump out at other people.
Yeah.
And obviously, like certain things you can stretch, like proportion wise, but I feel like you have to have a really good grasp of it, of how it would be naturally to then exaggerate it or stretch it convincingly, which Definitely. I'm not sure I know how to do that. But it's basically, I mean, in the sketching phase, a ton of erasing for sure. Sometimes just scrapping the paper entirely. But yeah, that's the hardest part. And just, I mean, constantly tweaking things to where like, something in your head just says, this looks believable. Because I'm not, I think you're the same way. Like, I'm not interested in hyper realism. I mean, I think some of my stuff is realistic in a sense, but for me, it just needs to be realistic enough that it's believable. But that's about it. I'm not trying to like, render some perfect object as it appears in reality. So it's just like things have to look right enough to where you buy this as a creature or an organic thing, and then that's about it. But
100%. Well, so you classify as self-taught, right?
I mean, self-taught.
There's YouTube and stuff. But
I mean, it's like self-taught. I don't know if anybody's really self-taught. I mean, I don't have a degree, but it's like I've got many teachers, whether they know it or not. I mean, through Instagram and YouTube and books. I mean, the whole scope of your life and every sort of internalized influence. I mean, self-taught insofar as I've pursued knowledge on my own and like strove to get, better, but like obviously learned from the techniques and art of all kinds of people.
Yeah. I guess that's what most people informally call self-taught nowadays, to a certain degree. So if you're watching this, you're learning and you're not self-taught anymore. Yeah. Calling you out.
I'm self-taught and still very much self-teaching.
Oh yeah. 100%.
Slowly but surely. But yeah.
What's what we've touched on a little bit, but like what's one area of your art you're looking to improve in the next year, or maybe a new habit or something related to your practice?
I mean, honestly, I'd really like to work on just getting better at backgrounds in general. I feel like a lot of my stuff is kind of like floating in space sometimes, which sometimes is intentional. It's like some pieces that I've drawn, I almost view them as like heraldic devices almost, where it very much like in my mind is like a stat, like, I don't know, certain things I don't need it to be rooted in a scene, so to speak. Like in my mind, it's not like this is this actual character or creature like in this environment. To me, like some of the stuff's more like it's like an emblem or like, something you'd see on like a banner or something.
Yeah.
So, but obviously certain pieces, like I would love to do more like fleshed out backgrounds. And I find backgrounds super, super difficult. Mm-hmm. And I feel like when I attempt it, a lot of the times I just, again, overwork it to hell and just like put way too many marks in and then just muddy the background up and then things get kind of confused and lost. So yeah, I'd like to work on that. Probably should sketch more often. I mean, I see like artists that have like a sketchbook practice and they're sketching daily, and I'm like, I don't ever sketch. I mean, like I sketched 4 projects and like, I thumbnail a bunch before sending something to a client, of course. But yeah, I'd really like to get in the habit of just sketching more and getting away from the mindset of like everything has to be something or for something or seen. Like just to draw just for the sake of drawing and just build up those just kind of like sketching chops a little bit. Because I definitely don't sketch as much as I should. And then sometimes you get to the sketching phase and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And just keeping up, just more consistent with that kind of stuff. And again, not having beef for anything, just filling a sketchbook and just staying loose and just concepting more ideas that way. We'll see if that happens. I'm gonna try to hold myself to it, but.
Well, you got an accountability buddy now, so I'll hold you. I'll check in every once in a while.
Sounds good.
Those are all good habits, man. Especially with the sketching. I can kind of tell when I'm on it and when I'm off it a little bit in terms of like that daily kind of practice. I'd say for me it's probably more weekly. Mm-hmm. But I think for me it's helpful to do just like purely academic studies every once in a while too. Like artists that they have something that I don't naturally excel at, I'll study them that I really like, and then that kind of helps me out too. Especially when it's like I don't know what to draw. It's like, look, I mean, I'm not claiming it's my own work. I just want to dissect it, reverse engineer why this piece is really strong. So
yeah, I saw those like horse head studies you recently posted. Those were really cool.
Thanks, man. Yeah,
that's the kind of stuff that I need to do more of. And
horses and people, man. The hardest things to draw are the great teachers. For me, they're the hardest things to draw.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I would love to. There's a lot of ideas I have that involve humans or the human form, and that's super, super difficult for me. That's definitely a weak point. I'd like to not always draw some sort of animal or mythical creature or whatever. But yeah, because like faces are so tough.
Oh yeah.
And I've started doing some like, I don't know, like broken statue faces, so it's like, it's human, but it's also stone. You have a little more like wiggle room with like, the nose is chipped off of the statue. It's like slowly sort of familiarizing myself with the human form, but not fully. Cause it's in like hands, just super, super difficult. So I definitely like to really buckle down and like focus on some figure drawing and figure studies and stuff like that. And, because I have a lot of ideas that involve that I'm just not really capable of executing, at least to a level that I'm satisfied with. So yeah, that's another one for sure.
You feel like your natural inclination is to be like a perfectionist?
For sure. Much to my detriment. I'm actually, I'm participating in a group show here in Denver next month, and I've known about it for a while, and I've procrastinated like always. So now it's in like 4 weeks, but I told myself that I was going to dabble in a new medium. So I bought like a 12. It's sitting over there. It's still in its middle.
This isn't supposed to be an interrogation, by the way.
No, I'm just, it's 12 by 16, which is far larger than anything I draw. But I'm just really trying to like force myself to like experiment with a new medium. So I'm doing like some acrylic paint stuff, which I haven't done in at least 15 years, maybe, over 10. And, so I haven't painted in 10 plus years, and I'm like, this sucks. Like, you suck. Like, why is this not good? I'm like, and just try to remind myself of like, you don't do this and you haven't done this and you don't know what you're doing, and that's fine. Because I definitely expect perfection out of the gate, which is obviously absurd. And it can just kind of deter you from experimenting and I don't know. I think maybe it's partly fueled by social media, maybe, and like having a social media page and this kind of like weird pressure to like post work all the time or post. I mean, I hardly post. I mean, lately I hardly post anything these days.
Oh yeah, but, it's very real though.
But just that pressure to like, this needs to be something for something, and it doesn't. So just trying to get back into just drawing more for myself and experimenting with more mediums, because there's a lot of stuff that I'm interested in and want to dabble in, and just not expecting perfection out of the gate, and just playing with more stuff and drawing for fun if possible. As a kid, when you're drawing, you're just like, you have no expectations. You just sit down and you just start ripping through stuff. And like, I wish I could do that now. It's like kind of impossible, which is kind of sad, but trying to get back to that in some small way. And, just not thinking everything has to be some finished piece or shown or, whatever. But
I mean, I'm with you, dude. All those are traps I find myself in all the time. So I don't want to be a hypocrite and like, provide you solutions, all that stuff that plague me too. All those things I had the same challenge with. That compulsion to like, you haven't posted in a week. It's time to post. I've just found, especially in the last year, the less I fixate on that stuff, the happier I am, frankly. But in order to like grow it, you have to focus on it. So it is a tricky thing. But I think people who kind of lose themselves to it too much, there's nothing to gain from that.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely stepped back from it quite a bit. I mean, I don't know. Obviously, Instagram's not what it used to be, and like it's so wishy-washy. I feel like nobody sees anything anyway. So, which sucks, obviously, on one hand, but it's also kind of liberating.
Well, it's not you. That's the thing I have to remind myself. It's like, it's not my work. My work's gotten better. Your work's gotten better. It's the platform.
Yeah.
Which is weird that like, your best work gets less reach and it like gets in your head, but it's like, oh no, it's just the platform.
Yeah. So now I'm just kind of at a point where I just don't really care about it. I'm trying not to. Like I just don't care about trying to keep up with it as far as like frequency goes. And plus, I've reposted like I don't know. You can only repost like old work so many times, and I don't want to just like post just to post and keep posting these old pieces that people have seen a million times. So obviously if I got something new, I'll throw it up there. But I'm at a point now where I just am not really worrying about it, which is kind of nice because I feel like I used to be so worried about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it'd still be great if people actually saw what I posted. You know, it would be nice. I feel like 3 years ago, when I had like a quarter of the followers, my engagement was like 10 times better. I could post some just like whip, and it's like you can't even tell what it is, and it's like crazy engagement. Now you post some finished client piece, and like 20 people see it, and you're like, awesome.
Yeah.
But
No, dude,
whatever.
I can definitely relate. And I
It
think
is
that's
what it
what's
is.
key too
It's
is,
not. It's not real. None of it's real. So
yeah, for sure. I was kind of curious, like, so current day, what
mhm.
would be maybe two or three like sources of artistic influence? Like, are like people who just kind of like always blow your mind and continue to inspire you?
um, I mean, I'm
They could
sure.
be deceased artists. I just mean like kind of all the time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. As far as like old school stuff goes, I mean, Durr and Dore are two huge influences for sure. I mean, two of my favorite artists of all time. Still, especially Dore. Look at his work, and
Yeah.
just mind boggling. And especially when I started like getting into pen and ink, I wasn't super familiar with engraving and all that. So I was looking at some of his pieces, and I was like, "This is a pen and ink piece." I'm like, "This is insane." Especially all the like negative stuff and all the white on black. I'm like, how like
Yeah.
picked all this out with like I just thought it was like an ink piece. I'm like, oh, it's an engraving. That makes a lot of sense. But yeah, I mean those are two big ones for sure. I mean some of the old painters like William Blake, Sasha Schneider, um, Henry Fuseli, love all that kind of stuff. And like I'm not sure how much it really influences my art in a technique sense because it's obviously they're painters, but I feel like thematically super inspiring and just like a lot of their works like super atmospheric and kind of symbolic, which I feel like more drawn to that kind of stuff these days.
Mm.
And as far as like contemporary stuff, I mean, when I first got on Instagram, whatever year that was, 2012 or 13, and first started kind of discovering pen and ink. I mean, I really didn't know that pen and ink was like a medium that you could focus in.
Yeah.
Because I was always drawing with like ballpoint pens in high school. Didn't even really know about fine liners and stuff like that. And then getting on Instagram for the first time and finding artists like Richie Beckett, Sin Eater, John Baisley, Thomas Hooper, stuff like that. I mean, still some of my favorite artists and huge influences. I mean, Richie Beckett is a big one. Love his work. And then more recent stuff. I mean, really like you had her on your podcast, Saprofile,
Mm-hmm.
not
Brittany.
Brittany. Her stuff's amazing. Great. I mean, just like even having done ink stuff for as long as I have now, and like seeing that, I'm like, how did you do this?
Yeah,
Which is the same
she's
with like Aaron Horkey. Like, obviously, I don't know how you can be an ink artist and not be influenced by Aaron Horkey. It's like it's inspiring, and also I'm like, I'm just gonna quit because I'm never gonna do that. So
yeah.
and then like Mystic Barbarism, Robin Harris, his work's super super cool, and I feel like he's got like a really really unique style and like a very unified kind of like aesthetic and
I'll have an
subject.
episode of his coming out relatively soon as well.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, his stuff's awesome. Super, super inspiring. Yeah, I mean, I'm a sucker for medieval stuff. So super rad.
It is cool too, like being into pen and ink illustrations, but maybe not being into like comic art, because they are like there's like a different style. There's overlap for sure. Um, because I've been getting a lot more into comic books the last couple years, and I like draw more from that. But there is like a different approach, in terms of like the hatching and values, because with I think what I like about the comic art in a lot of cases is that we're talking about like the heavy blacks and like leaving a lot of like white space and stuff. So I'm interested to see kind of where I go in the next year in terms of drawing inspiration, because I frankly don't know. There's so many different avenues.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like kind of tossed in between them all a little bit. And I want to paint some more. I feel like if I'm not careful, I'm going to get pigeonholed into just doing pen and ink stuff. Like I got to preserve that,
That's kind of how I feel on multiple counts of what you just said. But yeah, I mean, I love pen and ink, and I love drawing, but I feel like I'm kind of at a crossroads myself right now, and like I feel like I have ideas that I'm not sure if ink is the best medium to serve those ideas. And like I said, getting more into like atmospheric and like kind of softer imagery, it's certainly achievable with ink, but ink is also like it's just so time consuming, and I'd like to be able to complete pieces a little quicker for starters, and also just reintroduce some more dynamic mark making and some more energy, get a little looser, get a little more raw. I feel like sometimes inking gets so just tight and just like dots and so like tense and technical. And like recently I was looking at a bunch of old Warhammer art by John Blanche, and his stuff is just like so chaotic and energetic, and there's just like
definitely
paint bursts everywhere and just a lot of energy. And then I look at a piece of mine, it's just like this static image. So I kind of want to get away from that in a sense. And I'm not a big comic guy, but I do like the artwork and like you're saying about the high contrast, but it's also super energetic and super dynamic poses and there's a lot of action and narrative inherent in the pieces, which honestly I think is something you do super well. I feel like a lot of my pieces, they can feel kind of flat and static, and you've got a lot of energy and narrative and a lot of your ink stuff, and a lot of like energetic forms.
Appreciate it.
So I mean, stuff like that is inspiring. I'd like to do some more. Yeah, I don't know, just looser, raw kind of stuff, and not so focused on the technical side of things. I mean, certainly, I think you need some degree of technical proficiency to convey your ideas. But also, I feel like what I'm drawn to in a lot of art, especially lately, is just the kind of emotion and energy in it, and the kind of atmosphere, which doesn't really have anything to do with tech. I mean, not anything. Obviously, it takes technique to convey those things, but just getting away from, I don't know, pen and ink feels kind of like rigid lately, and I just want to get like very interested in painting as well. I mean, I painted miniatures a bunch as a kid and models, but like I would love to do more painting, and eventually try to dabble in oils, and also interested in dabbling in graphite just because it's softer and a little less defined, which is appealing to me. And also just working larger scale. My work's so small, and it takes so long. And sometimes I'm like, I'll spend 2 weeks on a piece, and I have this drawing that's like this big, and I'm just like, was this worth? Is this end result? Is the amount of time put into this end result? Is the juice worth the squeeze, so to speak? And I'm like it's so time consuming, and like I'm working as fast as I can realistically work on this stuff without sacrificing quality. So yeah, I'd like to work larger and also not spend so long on every single piece, and just have some larger work and not be hunchbacked over a desk all the time. Stand up and work on a canvas or something. But So
I
yeah,
feel
this
you, man.
this acrylic thing that I'm experimenting with at the moment is just kind of force myself to like just start and do something and just have no expectations, just kind of see where it goes. But yeah, I mean, over the next whatever 6 months, year, really trying to dabble in other mediums, like I mean, graphite and paint specifically, and just and keep doing the ink stuff, obviously. And honestly, the last 4 days working on this painting has actually kind of made me appreciate things about inking that I didn't really before. And it's
Hmm.
almost made me now want to ink, which before I was like, I don't even want to sit down and draw anything. But now, like, just having that kind of break and new kind of process.
I feel like I'm listening to the end of Wife Swap. When they when they start getting thankful about their old wife.
Yeah, I miss ink's always there for me.
Yeah.
I won't abandon it, but yeah. So I don't know. Just trying to dabble more because I feel like you can really like restrict yourself and box yourself in. You're like, I'm like, I'm an ink artist, but I don't want to be just an ink artist. I don't want to confine
Yeah.
myself to a single medium or a single thing. So I think you kind of create these traps and boxes for yourself. Like that's nobody else's expectation. I mean, that's what people would associate my work with, but it's not like there's some pressure to always work in ink. It's just
No.
you get comfortable and you get in these kind of ruts. So just try not fall prey to that, I guess, and just experiment and dabble. And again, it doesn't have to be for anything. It doesn't have to be some complete piece, but just starting to get familiar with some new mediums and whatnot.
Definitely. I guess one other thing too, even with just pen and ink, if you wanted to spice things up, trying different tools, like just the different, like for instance, I've embraced more brush in the last year, and that has changed my style, I think, for the better.
Nice.
Eventually I want to get more into like dip pens. And
Yeah,
like with that, I mean, you really can't go for a perfection look. It's not a fine liner. So like you have to go with the energy, I think, in a lot of cases with, the dip pens and fountain pens and stuff like that.
for sure.
So I don't know. Just another thing to keep in mind too,
Yeah,
painting is rubbing you the wrong way.
yeah. The dip pens is another thing that's been like on the list for a long time. I just haven't picked one up yet. Haven't done it, but I did. I mean, early on when I was still very much like learning ink and kind of figuring out process and stuff. Did a handful of pieces almost exclusively or exclusively with a paintbrush, and actually did really like that. I don't really know why I stopped doing it. Because yeah, there is a lot more just like energy inherent to a brush stroke versus a fine liner, and obviously easier to get line width and variation and stuff. I don't really know why
Well, the key
I stopped doing it, but
the key for me too is just not to be so. I work bigger now, and I work with the brush, and then like, yes, there's sometimes I pull off a stroke, and I'm like, is that kind of ugly? But then when I do like 100 strokes, I'm like, actually, now it looks good. It's weird. Whereas with the fine liner, it's like, oh, that line looks good. But then I do 100, and I'm like, doesn't have that thing I'm looking for. So I have to always remind myself to be very patient with it, and just like, if that one's not that great, it's going to get lost in the mess of things. And
yeah,
even then, it was probably a subjective, little thing that I was thinking anyways. So I don't know. I'm become a pretty big advocate for the brush. I really enjoy it. And I like these too, man. These things that like Kim Jong G would use. God, I've gotten
nice.
addicted to these. These are my favorite. The ink isn't as high quality as like some of the stuff I normally will do with the Sable brush, but the convenience of this thing. And at first, I was terrible with it, but now I'm kind of getting a little bit better. But it had quite a learning curve for me.
Nice. Yeah, just like with stuff like the brush pens and whatever paintbrush, just the energy and the stroke and like fine liners, it's so it's such a uniform mark, and it's just sort of feel like it just loses some energy, and there's, it gets too technical, and yeah, I guess I'm just trying to get away from technical perfectionism and having everything like look clean. I'm just trying to get away. Like I've just lost interest in a lot of like clean work, and it's just kind of frustrating working that way. It's just not like a quality that I really care as much about anymore. I just want it to be raw and more emotional, more energetic. But again, it's hard to break out of the muscle memory the way you're used to working, and you just big thing.
You enjoy your routine with it,
Yeah, for sure.
Well, man, let's go ahead and pull up some of your work.
Sure.
All right. So starting out, can you tell me a little bit about? So we have the detail, black and white pen and ink shot on the right, and then on the left we have the full image colorized.
Yeah. So this was a piece for Sahlsten Chains that was included as a 12 by 12 print in the 30-year anniversary box set reissue.
For Dirt?
Yeah, for Dirt.
Let's just pause. You contributed to one of the best metal grunge albums of all time, dude. Like, remind yourself how fucking cool that is. Like, we're just talking about all things we need to improve on. I don't mean to rain on your parade. Just like embrace the present of how fucking cool that is, dude. I am happy for you.
Much appreciated. It's still. I mean, this is probably, I guess 2-ish years old at this point. It still is kind of surreal to me. I still can't really believe that it happened. I appreciate it, man. It's very cool. I mean, one of my favorite albums of all time. I mean, honestly, like being a kid and hearing like Them Bones and Rooster on the radio, like driving to school. Like, those are honestly some of my earliest musical memories. It's still to this day one of my favorite records.
Amazing.
So yeah, I got when I got the email about it, I was the email just said, do you happen to be a fan of? So small backstory. This all came to be through Ryan Clark, the vocalist of Demon Hunter, who I've worked with three times now at this point. And he has a design agency with his brother called Invisible Creature. So they've done a lot of like the Sahlsten Chains album packaging for their newer stuff. So I just finished a project for Demon Hunter, I believe, and then a week or two later, he emailed me. He was like, "You have to be an Sahlsten Chains fan?" I was like, "Yes." Like, probably top 5 all-time band for me. So that's how that came to be. And yeah, just basically riffing on the album cover. Just kind of, I don't know. I don't want to get like, there's a lot of symbolism packed into this. Honestly, probably too much. It's funny looking at this now. This is another thing where I would have like stripped back a little bit maybe. And this is stripped back from where my head initially was at, because I just like, I just want to cram everything in. And I'm always trying to put in like some sort of latent symbolism and like little nods to different things. So I don't want to get like too into that, because I want to leave it open, open to interpretation, but basically taking kind of the basic setting of the cover, but kind of like a post-mortem thing almost, and sort of like a shrine almost, sort of like some sort of shrine-like aspect to stuff from the cover, and a lot of nods to the lyrical content of the album. Yeah, still super proud of this piece. The most color I've ever done by far. I think this is probably, I think the original is like 8 by 8 inches maybe, which was pretty big for me, which is still like a tiny.
Wait, the original is 8 by 8?
Yeah, I've got my book here. Yeah,
how the fuck do you do that, dude?
It's stupid. I just draw really small for whatever reason. I don't know why.
So is a vinyl 16 by 16?
So I mean that's the original drawing. So I mean,
Let me make it bigger. Sorry, I'm a little slow on the trigger here.
good.
Here, put up one more time. Wow.
So yeah, I think it's like 8 by 8. Which I mean, you can't really see on there. I mean, like some of the dots on this thing are so small. Like even looking at it now, it's just I don't really know why I've chosen to work this way. Some of the like this is I would never do stippling like this minuscule now because it just like this might be the longest I ever spent on a single piece. I think it was probably like somewhere like 70 hours of inking, maybe longer. I mean, especially you can't see it as much on like the final color version, but the stippling, like all around the corners and like the kind of vignette effect, just like that desert floor alone. I think I did that it was just like 5 days of just like stippling the background. I mean, it was super super tedious. And then I obviously I don't use a ton of color in general, but this one I feel like needed the color to really bring home the desert environment and to tie it into the palette of the original album cover. So that was another, I don't know, 20-30 hours of like color and tweaking in Photoshop. This piece took forever. But
so like when it comes to, I like how you color your pen and ink drawings, like limited color palette and like that approach. And I feel like if a client wanted something of mine that was pen and ink, I'd probably have a similar mindset. So how do you do it exactly? You have like a layer in Photoshop of the pen and ink drawing, and then, I mean, you put a lot of brush and you're just not trying to cover your pen lines. I've never fully understood that.
I have like I think it's 11 by 14, 12 by 16 Epson flatbed scanner.
Okay.
And you can scan in grayscale or black and white. You can play with the threshold, obviously. So all my images are scanned as a pure black image, and then I move that into Photoshop, and then just knock out the white background.
Okay.
So obviously with like grayscale, you'd have to play with. I'm competent enough in Photoshop to do like very basic things, but I don't really know that much about it. So I mean, like, if it was grayscale, you'd have to play with all the levels and threshold to get it darker black. So scanning as a pure black image is really handy. So then I can knock out the background. So I just have a pure, just the key lines on a transparent background, and then everything is just layered behind those key lines.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I think on this one, I may have like softened the key line a little bit to make it a little more like gray, like not such a pronounced like contour edge on some of this stuff. And that's another going back to habits. I have like a habit of just wanting to contour the hell out of everything. And this one, I was like really trying to keep it kind of soft looking and like very thin contour lines because I didn't want it to look too blocky.
Like a sticker or something.
Yeah. So yeah, this one was, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 layers. Like the desert floor is really what took the most time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably like 4 or 5 layers of like various oranges and various, transparencies. And yeah, just playing around with brushes and like, slowly kind of building up the highlights. And like, it's hard to see at this scale, but I guess you can see in the background, like there's very fine orange dots that was just like a spray brush and just like drop the transparency on it or the opacity on it. And just like slowly building up these textures with several brushes. But a lot of trial and error because I had never really done a color piece to this extent. So I mean, it looked very bad for a long time before I finally got it to a place where, I don't know, it was just a lot of tweaking because I was kind of figuring it out as I went because I hadn't really done anything quite like this before or really since. I haven't really done this much color, but yeah.
Did
overall,
you enjoy it, or was it that kind of like a bad like challenge for you at the time with the coloring and everything?
I enjoyed it because it was something new, and
Deadline was forgiving enough.
Yeah, luckily wasn't too under the gun on that one. Yeah, no, it was fun just because it was something new, and I love. I mean, I always sometimes I add color to pieces, and I feel like it takes something from them. And like I always love just the black key line, and I love the original drawing, and I just love black and white artwork.
Mm-hmm.
But this one, I feel like the color really did take it to the next level and kind of fill it out and bring it to life. So it was cool to see this one come together. It just took forever.
But, it looks awesome, man.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, still pretty stoked about it, and yeah, still just kind of surreal to me that I was even asked to do this. Super honored for sure. Yeah.
Do you have the vinyl copy as well?
Yeah, I did get the box set just so I could see the final result. And yeah, it's crazy. It's pretty extensive. There's all kinds of cool stuff in there.
Very cool, man. So another huge band as well. This is a poster for a specific show.
Yeah, it was a show for it's their Portland date in 2022, I believe.
Okay.
Which actually, actually, I think it might have been the only one. The show actually got canceled day of because I think Billy Corgan was sick or something. So this was the first gig poster I ever did, and I was so excited to see it posted, and then they posted that the show was canceled, and then they played the show like 2 days later. I was like, damn. So yeah, I got a bunch of, I got the APs to sell, which obviously it's kind of interesting trying to sell posters for a show that never happened. Maybe to some collectors that's appealing. I don't know. So that was a bummer, but what are you going to do? Yeah. But either way, it was a lot of fun to work on. This was through collections, and yeah, I mean, doing something for Smashing Pumpkins in any capacity was definitely not something that I ever thought would happen. It's kind of funny, but yeah, so it was for the Portland show, so I just tried to keep it very Pacific Northwest with the Osprey. And just perched on this sort of ahistorical, mythic trident situation. Just a bunch of barnacles. This was probably like, I don't know, a year into my put barnacles on everything phase, which I think I'm still in. They're just super fun to draw on, and I just kind of like the aspect of, I don't know if there's like common themes necessarily throughout all my work, but one of them is definitely like nature kind of reclaiming things.
Yeah. Barnacles are a great way of doing that. They're not too grotesque. They're recognizable, and they have dimension, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, this one was a lot of fun.
What about the graphic design elements? Did you do that, or did you work with somebody?
Yeah, this one I did everything, which design stuff and layout and like typography is definitely something I kind of struggle with. So this one again was just like a ton of trial and error and a ton of tweaking, trying to get it to a place that, again, just that kind of nameless feeling where I'm just, it gets to a certain point, I'm just like, this looks like it's there. This looks good to me, and that's just kind of the only barometer for.
I mean, I think it looks excellent, man. It's a weakness of mine doing like graphic design, and you could have told me you partnered with a professional graphic designer, like that's all they do, and I would have believed you. It looks excellent.
Oh, well, thank you, man. Because you can see the original there on the left.
Yeah.
There's no background, so that was because this one was a bit more of a deadline, and it took. Which do you want to see if I have the original? Do you want me to hold them up? Is that worthwhile?
If you have them, yeah.
Yeah, let me see. I've got most of the stuff still. Yeah, this one, like using that sort of doorway behind it, like the kind of gray, that's all just like a texture I put in because by its own, it kind of needed some sort of background element. So I just made that kind of arch just because I thought it was like kind of an interesting shape. Because originally I think I was going to put a halo behind the osprey's head and decided not to do that, but then like use the arch to kind of achieve the same halo-esque effect. But yeah, this one took a while to get like the background to a place where I was like, didn't feel too flat and felt like grounded in sort of a larger environment, I guess. But so there's just the original. Again, like everything I do is pretty much on 9x12 paper, so that, I mean, they're all pretty small.
Insanity, man. And is your sketch all on the same sheet, or do you transfer?
Yeah, I probably should use a light box, but everything is just ink on top of the sketch, all on one page.
That's crazy, man.
So I'm just laying down ink right on the original pencils.
Do you work with like a really light pencil then?
Yeah. I mean, I just use I don't even know. I just use like basic mechanical pencils, but a pretty soft lead. And yeah, I mean, I keep the pencils super light. Generally, I'm not putting in a ton of detail. Just kind of, as long as like the general silhouette is kind of in place, and I know where everything's going. And like some of this stuff is also like, like these, I don't know, the stuff kind of flying off of the trident, like those flowy kind of bits. Like some of that stuff I'm just adding, on the fly, like once it's starting to come together, and you can, sometimes shapes I have penciled in, I'll erase if like by the time I start inking I feel like it's not necessary, or I'll add stuff in. But as long as the basic structure's there, the pencils are pretty light, because I generally try not to have to erase too much of the pencils, because especially with the really fine stippling stuff, it can kind of like muddy and smear the dot work.
Mm-hmm.
So generally try not to do too much erasing once I put the pencils in, or the ink in.
I've noticed that it like makes it less black. Like when I have to erase over like a micron, it makes it more gray. Yeah. Which if I want that look, it's good, but most cases I don't.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about this one then.
Yeah, so the one on the left was for Amenra's set at Northwest Terror Fest in Seattle in May. And that all started, I guess, like March, maybe. They announced their U.S. tour, and a huge fan of Amenra. Prior to this last tour, I had seen them one time when they closed Psycho Las Vegas in 2019. It was like right before I moved to Denver, actually. And I was familiar with their music at the time. I wasn't like a huge fan necessarily. Like I listened to some of the records, but seeing that set and seeing them live just cemented me as a fan. I mean, it was incredible. Still probably like top 5 sets I've ever seen. And obviously the records are fantastic. Love the records, but I feel like they're a band that is really like hard to fully grasp until you've seen them live, because like their live show is just it's incredible. And I don't know if there's not really too many bands doing what they're doing live.
Like highly emotive. Like what makes it incredible?
Super emotive, super ritualistic is kind of an overused term within metal, but it truly does feel ritualistic. And the crowd is super quiet and respectful, and like they do like loud, soft dynamics better than
kind of like Swans.
Yeah,
you ever seen Swans bit. Live?
I haven't. Kind of. I mean, definitely from like the kind of like Neurosis school,
right?
Like really good dynamics, and like the quiet parts are super quiet. And then like when the heavy riff comes in, it's just like high contrast sonically, I guess. And then they have the whole visual backdrop with like video stuff going on behind, which is really cool. Obviously, as a visual artist, when that stuff's done right and contributes and mirrors the music.
I feel like I have seen this band now. I think I actually have seen Amenra. I'll look at some videos after. We were talking earlier, and I wasn't sure, but they had like a giant video screen.
Yeah, it's all like black and white stuff, and like the vocalist Colin like faces away from the crowd most of the time, and
yep, I remember that.
Yeah, they're awesome. But anyways, so they announced that tour, and I saw that they were playing Denver, and I just messaged Colin on Instagram, and basically was like, "Hey, like, saw y'all are touring soon. Saw you're playing Denver. I'm a big fan. Like, I think my aesthetic would, you know, matches what y'all are doing. I don't know if you're doing like gig posters for individual dates, but I was like, you can check out my page, and if you dig it, then maybe we can do like a poster for the Denver show." And I reach out to a lot of bands that way if I think it'd be a good fit, and if it's a band that I like, and you know, maybe you hear back, I don't know,
sometimes 30, it works, sometimes
35% of the time, maybe half the time, if that. Yeah, and actually saw it and responded pretty quickly, and then he was just like, "Sure, sounds good." I was like, "Oh shit!" I was like, "Cool." So yeah, just started as doing something for just the Denver show, and had a lot of back and forth, kind of figuring out the idea and the concept. Honestly, probably the most back and forth I've ever had with a client. The most like tweaking and kind of kicking ideas around, which was super cool. You know, it's kind of,
you can tell they care.
Yeah, and they're like very guarded about what kind of imagery they attach to the band, and they have a very like distinct palette and aesthetic. So a lot of it was like, you know, I've been a fan of the band for years, so I had all kinds of ideas, and I feel like a lot of my early ideas were very like symbolic and like trying to put, you know, maybe too much symbolic imagery into things. And, you know, Colin really like pared a lot of that back and was like, "This is cool, but like, how about if we just like," so originally I have an old personal piece I did that's like a talon with like, it's kind of turning into like a candle at the top.
Okay.
Like the top of the foot is like a burning candle.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And so he had seen that piece, and he commented that he liked that. And so I originally kind of drew like another version basically with the candle, and he's like, "Lose the candle. Just have it be the claw." And just kind of let that speak for itself. So yeah, long story long, just a lot of tweaking and getting to that. And the tooth, and then the claw are kind of tied into something that they had provided, sort of the direction there. The calligraphy in the corner says "with fang and claw." So the imagery is kind of mirroring that, and the calligraphy logo and then that kind of device in the corner were done by a French tattoo artist. I don't know his name. His handle's Ascari Dios. Okay. But it's all hand drawn calligraphy. It's stuff super rad. Like custom lettering and stuff like that, I can't do whatsoever. Yeah. So that stuff blows my mind. So yeah, he provided those and then laid everything out. So the gold claw was the Seattle version, and then the silver claw was kind of the mirror image of that for the Denver show. And then they've got this tour coming up this month with Primitive Man and Blackwater Holy Light, and they just basically asked if they could use that imagery again for the whole tour poster and whole tour package. You know, so I was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. You guys can do whatever you want. So yeah,
that's cool, man. Sounds like super cool. A good client to work with too. Like the healthy amount of back and forth. Like
yeah, and it's also just cool. Like, you know, someone that you're just a fan of, and then suddenly you're having a dialogue with this person that you admire, and you know, kicking ideas around. I mean, that's, you know, it's very cool. But yeah, they were great to work with. I was very stoked I got to see them in Seattle and in Denver on this last tour. And then hopefully catching at least one date on this one coming up. Yeah, incredible band. If you haven't seen them live, I highly recommend it, because it's, I think, first and foremost, they're a live band that should be experienced in that setting. Really, really great. So, yeah.
Fantastic. If I have seen them, which I'm going to vouch later, I think it was with Yob, like 4 years ago or something. It was maybe pre-pandemic. I don't know. I'm kind of hazy about that, but I do remember it being awesome.
They did tour with Yob at some point. So it sounds right. Yob, another phenomenal live band.
100%. I've seen Yob twice now. One time in a smaller club, and then one time at was it Masquerade? I think it was Masquerade. I especially like pre-pandemic, I was going to 3-4 shows a month. So yeah, I kind of lost track of stuff.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, and just the raw drawings. Are these also very tiny?
Yeah. So the claw is actually like it's about the length of a 9x12 page.
Okay.
The tooth is super tiny. The tooth is like, I don't know, 2 inches tall or something. Another thing that I drew too small, and then I started like stippling. I'm like, why? Why did you draw this so tiny? Because like there's a certain point where it's so small, it's hard to like keep track of where you're at.
Yeah.
And like my face is so close to the paper, and I'm just
especially with something like a tooth where it's, there's no face, there's no, it's just like an object,
Yeah, the tooth was actually kind of tricky because it is just kind of just the flat like side view of that, like trying to not have it look too flat and trying to get enough value into where it, conveys some form.
Yeah.
And it is just such like a flat, plain surface, and trying to like just get some texture and marks in there and make it look, all weathered and, believable as a tooth.
I like those like kind of highlights you have on it though. I can't really show you with my cursor, but just the white streaks that kind of like give it that dimensionality both in the claw and the tooth there.
Yeah, stuff like that. I'll kind of just like block out that form with pencil and just try to keep track and try not to accidentally put a bunch of marks in where there needs to be a highlight, which sometimes happens. I just try to, there's no rushing anything really with the stippling, but like try not to get ahead of myself. And I'm filling in some area that was supposed to be a highlight, and then there's really no going back. You could put white back in if you really need to with I've got ones like Jelly Roll white pens, but preferably would not like to have to do that.
I have a tool I'd like to recommend you, if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
I heard about, Christian Dane?
Yeah.
So fellow meticulous pen and ink artist. He told me about these. They are sand erasers. As long as you don't go real hard with it, you can pick up pen marks pretty easily, especially like micron and fine liners. So you just rub it, it literally sands it off. So like I haven't broken paper, and I use like Bristol board. Mm-hmm. It's it does change the tooth of the paper just a little bit, but it's actually a really useful tool for like little minor things. And he was like, I don't know if I want to put this thing out there. And I'm like, well, it's out there.
That's secret tech.
It's good shit, man. Seriously, it's like $5. I guarantee you'll at least find it worth $5. Intriguing. I can tell you.
I got to check that out. That sounds good.
What brand is it again? Tombow, man. I love Tombow products.
Tombow. Okay, cool.
That's one of my favorite art supply things. I have this Tombow small eraser. It's a little micro eraser. I love this thing.
Nice.
And then Tombow brush pen.
Right on. I'll have to check that out. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And for anyone tuning in, there's your little secret. There's your little treat for staying an hour and a half in. So High and Fire. How did this come to be?
This one, honestly, Jeff, the bass player, actually reached out to me some time ago. It's been, this was a shirt design for a tour last fall, I believe. This officially came out.
Okay.
But he probably reached out to me initially, maybe like 2.5 years ago. And I don't know, timing just never kind of worked out. We had like a back and forth for a while, and then kind of finally came to fruition with this one because they were needing some new designs for this tour, I guess. So yeah, was super stoked to do this. One of my favorite bands ever. Seen them a bunch of times now. And yeah, basically just very rooted in sort of Sumerian, Mesopotamian mythology. I don't know if you're familiar with the Lamassu, the statue. It's like a lion body, eagle winged human head kind of.
Oh yeah.
Kind of like a threshold guardian sort of creature. So like the crown in this is directly pulled from the Lamassu, and so are like the horns and like the ears and the crown. I gave it a skull face just because
of metal.
Just because skulls are metal, and never get tired of drawing skulls. But yeah, so that's pulled from that, and then the whole kind of composition. I don't know if it has like a title, but it's kind of inspired by like an old like alchemy piece. It's like kind of this like bird hybrid creature standing on like a globe, I think, and it's also got kind of like a man face and sort of strange. It just kind of like fit with the Lamassu a little bit. But yeah, just a badass mythological creature was kind of the idea with this one, and it's about it. And then yeah, just kind of bursting from some sort of interstellar sphere and grappling with this snake, which is kind of a nod to like Tiamat and just Mesopotamian, just a lot of Mesopotamian mythology kind of baked into this one, because they've got a lot of lyrical stuff dealing with that. And
what are so you got the close up in the middle on the right. Is this what am I looking at here exactly?
So the middle one, that was just like that's just the original piece, kind of the bulk of it's done. So I'll do the snake and the wing. I love drawing feathers. I draw I feel like I draw a ton of birds, and I love drawing birds, but also feathers are drawn so many feathers, and they're monotonous, but it's also just kind of meditative, just drawing a bunch of feathers and a wing.
Kind of challenging too.
I like it, but it is like this and that Alice in Chains piece too. It's like I'm like, why did I draw so many feathers? I've got to ink like all these feathers. But yeah, so the middle one is just the original piece, kind of halfway through inking, and then the one on the right, I don't know, that might be interesting for people to see. That's just the rough like concept sketch that I submitted for approval.
Okay.
So obviously, like the not much changed. The basic kind of composition is pretty much blocked in there, but I try to keep those pretty rough just so you get the gist of what's going on. Basically just changed the snake positioning a little bit, but it's all pretty much there in the concept sketch. And that was small. The concepts. I mean, the sketch that I ended up inking was a little bit larger scale than the thumbnail or whatever you want to call it, but yeah, had a lot of fun working on this one, and this one I kept it monochrome, obviously, because I was trying to do a little more color initially, but just decided I didn't really need it. I don't know, just picking out kind of details and highlights to kind of break up the field a little bit, but yeah.
So you laid down like gray digitally, and then also the font, their logo being a different color also helps too with separation.
Yeah. Just Photoshop everything. All the colors are done in Photoshop, which this one didn't take too long to color. I mean, I don't have like a tablet or anything. I'm doing all the color just with the trackpad on my Mac, which is stupid. I don't know. I should probably just. It's kind of absurd. There's all these little feathers, all like the little ends, like getting the color into like all those, like there's a lot of like little elements,
little
and like
pockets and stuff.
Just trying to make sure I don't miss anything and stay within the lines. Because I mean, really, once it's in Photoshop, it's literally just like a coloring book. Like you're just kind of filling in the key lines, which is kind of fun, but also I don't know. I kind of hate the digital phase, but it is what it is.
Yeah, well, it's something I know that I'm going to have to do more, but I've avoided, especially with just like I love hand painting stuff, even like an ink drawing, but getting consistency for like a screen printer, I know I'm going to have to do it eventually with digital coloring. And I think just a few more. These are really cool pieces, man. And you can see the pen for scale too, which is cool.
Thank you.
Are these personal ones?
Yeah, these are. So the one on the right, there's a third one I've done in this kind of vein. That's like it's like a lobster helmet.
Mm.
But these three are just like kind of an ongoing series. I call them anchorites. But the kind of hermit crab one on the right is the first one I did, and that was really like I think that was one of, if not like the first pieces I did when I was kind of burned out on like hatching and cross hatching. Well, I mean, there's a lot of hatching in this, but like this was my first kind of break away from like trying to be clean and just getting like tons of marks in there and just like overlaying lots of like really tiny hatch marks, which I hadn't really done, and then a lot of stippling as well to just get a rougher, more like textural kind of look.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was drawn on just like a little 5x5 square. And they're both pretty. All these are pretty tiny, just because like the mark making style on these is so labor intensive. If I drew it too big, I would just never finish it. So the small scale, at least I can like, it's realistically finishable. Yeah, these are just. I think I was just missing the ocean extra hard, and I never drew anything like this when I lived in Florida. It's like being away from water for the first time now. All I want to draw is like sea creatures. But yeah, just kind of combining sea creatures with medieval helmets. I don't know if you're familiar with the artist Jeremy Bastian.
I am.
Definitely some influence from him on this kind of stuff.
Was it Cursed Pirate Girl? Is that the thing that he works on?
Yeah. And I believe he does a lot of stuff actually with, I think a lot of his stuff is brush. It's all brush.
Really?
I think, which is crazy.
Some of it's very light.
Yeah.
He has a light hand.
Yeah, and like insanely detailed. And yeah, the fact that it's with a paintbrush is wild. But yeah, he does a lot of really cool like nautical stuff. Yeah, these just kind of an ongoing series. I've got 3. I've kind of got ideas for the next few. Yeah, these are just fun and changing up mark making, and also this was at a time where I'd kind of like neglected a lot of personal ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And like a lot of personal concepts that just sat on the back burner for so long. So this was also just trying to get back into just making stuff for myself and just, not shelving ideas for too long. Because I feel like, especially with personal work, like certain concepts kind of have a shelf life. And if they aren't realized soon enough, they kind of die on the vine, so to speak.
Good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Because I mean, there's been, I write tons of stuff down on my notes app on my phone just because I forget stuff. So if I don't write it down, I'll never remember. So I've got a huge ongoing list of just like random art ideas. And I've gone back and some older stuff, like stuff I was super stoked about at the time. Now I just like don't care. And it's like that idea kind of came and went. And now I have no interest in doing, whatever it may be. So it's like really trying to get better at balancing personal ideas alongside client work, because I think it's just important for sanity, if nothing else, just to get your own ideas out there and just work on stuff for you that's under no stipulations, and whatever. But yeah, so these honestly are some of my favorite pieces, and just we're super fun to work on, and looking forward to doing a few more sometime here.
It's always cool to like see a series, like it's beginning to end and even over the course of years. So I'm with you. Just another detail shot here.
Yeah.
Wow. That's unreal, man.
Thank you. Just basically like kind of just doing like almost like little square, just a lot of overlapping like tiny hatch marks, and then kind of stippling on top of that to just which these almost feel like with the stippling stuff, it almost feels more like painterly than like inking, because you're just like, it's nice not having to like worry about the actual marks you're making. Like it's pretty loose and pretty rough, which when I first started doing these, it was like anathema to everything I'd been doing prior, and like just throwing in these like scratchy little marks. I was like, I hope this looks cool eventually, because like these definitely like look really bad until they don't.
Yeah.
It looks like really kind of sloppy until it all kind of comes together with the values. So you just kind of have to like shoulder through that, middle phase where it doesn't really look like anything. Yeah, it's fun just building up the values super slowly and just kind of throwing down marks and not worrying about the integrity of each mark necessarily. But yeah, these been super fun to work on.
Just one more detail shot. Just letting the audience soak it in. So we got black braid here.
Yeah.
How did this come to be?
That one, John, the vocalist, just kind of reached out to me maybe like last summer, just kind of out of the blue. I didn't even know he followed me. Don't know at what point he found my work, but I was familiar with the band, and just messaged me on Instagram about doing some work. So this was for their fall tour last year with Wolves in the Throne Room. And this was John's been super great to work with. Honestly, like one of the best clients I've worked with. Just like kind of gives a loose kind of concept or where his head's at, but like pretty much total freedom. Sent me a few pieces that I'd done that he liked, and he's like, as long as it's kind of in this vein. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how this came to be. I don't really remember how we landed on this concept exactly. I think the antler thing into the branches was just kind of like an idea I had in my head for a while, awesome. Which certainly not original to me. I've seen, various branch antler variations.
Everything's been done.
Yeah.
That's what I've realized the more I create.
Pretty much. Yeah, I think I just like, honestly, that might have been like a personal concept that I had in my notes. And I was like, this could be cool to do for this. And, thematically fit with the band. Their last album, they had a song called, it's like moss covered altar of bone and ash or something. So this one was like a pretty like explicit nod to that song in the lyrics, and just an excuse to draw a crazy elk skull. Yeah, and then used for the back of the t-shirt as well for that tour. Yeah, it was a super fun one. Also, I think I've pretty much got all my originals. I don't sell a ton of originals, but this one's maybe, I don't know, like 6x5 or something.
It's great. Every time you do it, it's just like insanity to me, man.
It's just lots of really tiny dots. And like this is a one where like there's kind of a background. Like when I first started this, in my mind I was going to do like a full back, like everything that's black, I was going to do like a whole foresty kind of thing, which really only just survived in the kind of corner. Because I started and it just like just didn't really know what I was doing, and it just wasn't looking how I wanted it to, so I just kind of blacked it out and kept like a few little like motes of light just to break up.
You lose the power of the silhouette when you build a background on something like this, like the shapes of the antlers. Like,
well, also with the pure black too, I like that the antlers at the top, they don't have a contour line.
Yeah.
I like how that ended up looking. Yeah, just like enough of a background to kind of root it in place, so you kind of have the suggestion of a larger scene or larger environment or whatnot. Yeah, this one came together pretty quickly. Yeah, super stoked about it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and this one, I don't actually have the file. This is for Black Braids. European tour starting October, maybe.
Okay.
So I don't actually have the final poster image, but this is the original. They're touring with like Dodsreet and Lamp of Murmur, I believe.
Wow, great tour.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually did a piece for Dodsreet a few years ago, and they're a super cool band as well, from Sweden. But yeah, this one actually. So actually, I think for that last piece, I think one of the ideas that John had kind of floated was an eagle or a red-tailed hawk of some sorts, and I think I kind of went the direction of the skull. And then this one, we kind of just came back to that. We're like, let's do the hawk now.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, yeah, just want it, want a snake involved, kind of want it battling a snake or whatever.
Awesome composition, great flow, good
Oh.
negative space with those like kind of I never know what to call this. It's not exactly smoke, but it's just like a flowy, shape.
Yeah,
I think that's really cool. They're like carved out like that.
Thank you. And that's I use like elements like that and a fair amount of stuff. In this one, I just really didn't want to like block it out with like contour lines and just leave it as just the negative. Yeah, smoke. It's not really anything. It's just kind of
just cool shapes.
It just looks cool and it just breaks up the kind of the plane a little bit. But yeah, this one, like, I like that last drawing a lot, but like we were talking earlier about like static kind of images, this one I really wanted to do a more like dynamic pose and try to like instill some drama or some action in there.
Yeah.
It's
excellent. It's probably one of my, I mean, I want to see the whole thing, but it's one of my favorite of your pieces.
Thank you. Yeah, that's pretty much the whole thing. I mean, like the corner, like there's just more bark and logs and whatnot in the right corner, but that's pretty much like the bulk of it. But that honestly, that the big log and that it's kind of perched on, that took forever. That was like the hardest part of the entire piece. I've drawn so many birds at this point. Like, I don't know. I kind of know what I'm doing with the feathers and like like I've just drawn a lot of birds. So like I've got my bearings a little bit. But I haven't really done bark texture quite to that extent. And so that one, a lot of like kind of mental planning before putting ink down. I was like, what am I like? How am I going to draw this?
Yeah.
I didn't want to stipple the whole thing, and I wanted to keep like the vertical line, which I haven't really. That was the first time doing like cleaner, just like straight lines like that. But I haven't really done that in a while. So it was fun and just a lot of experimenting, but it took a long time. But it was fun rendering the bark on that and all the different kind of like layers and trying to balance like different textures with the kind of moss and then like the bare wood beneath and stuff. But yeah, super happy with how this piece came out, and living out here in Colorado, I see red-tailed hawks everywhere. So I've been wanting to draw one for a while. So yeah.
Very neat, man.
Thank you.
Let me just look ahead. Wow, we got quite a bit. So you can go at whatever pace you want. We don't have to go through a giant story with each one, but I just want to like at least show all the work you've done.
Yeah. So this one I did in maybe 2021. It's fairly old piece at this point, but just a t-shirt design for Kvelertak. Big fan of the band. And obviously like very owl centric imagery kind of features across all their albums. And this one was like totally open-ended. They're just like, draw a cool owl. And I was like, done. So yeah, this one, if you know the Frank Frazetta Conan piece where he's kind of on like the pile of bodies, like holding the sword.
Yeah.
That was kind of like the rough jumping off point, kind of a tribute to that piece, because I love Frazetta. So kind of just like if Conan was an owl, perched on the skull, like the axe on the right is like pretty much directly taken from that Frazetta piece, just kind of like a little nod to the axe in that painting.
Nice.
But yeah, basically just this owl just perched on a bunch of defeated, enemies or whatnot. And then, so actually when I mentioned that old Masquerade show, first time I saw them, they were opening for Doom Riders and High on Fire. And Doom Riders had just released their album Grand Blood, like right around, like that was like their tour supporting that album, which Thomas Super did the cover for that. And so that kind of walled crown is a nod to that album cover because they played with Kvelertak the first time I saw both those bands. So just kind of a little tribute in there. And then the horns are kind of a tribute to the debut album cover that Baisley did with the kind of curled horns on that owl. So just some kind of nods to just the sort of visual legacy of that band, I guess.
Yeah,
super fun one. And it's funny, like this, you can see the original there on the right. This was like pretty early on, and when I was very much focused on like clean lines, and I stressed out so much about this one, like making all these like I wanted it's not really feathers, but I wanted to make it very flowy looking, and these kind of like weaving shapes or whatever. I honestly don't even know if I can draw like this now. I just feel like my style and approach has changed quite a bit, and the idea of like pulling these like cleaner lines now is like so daunting to me. Because like I'm happy with the end result, but again, like just working this way was so stressful to me, and I just don't really miss it. I mean, I like the effect and I like the result, but the stippling and all that was just kind of like a move away from that a little bit. But still one of my favorite pieces I think I've done, which for an older piece, usually I don't know. I look at older stuff and I kind of hate a lot of it, but this one I'm still pretty proud of. And I think they're still available as a t-shirt. So that's cool to see.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's a close up.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. Glad you sent the close-up pictures. That definitely helps out.
And then on the left is just the latest piece I did for Demon Hunter. It was a t-shirt design. The logo was done by a guy named Nathan Pomlace.
It's like an alternate logo for them.
Yeah, and then I think I have the original. All the colors were done by Ryan Clark.
Okay.
The vocalist, because he's a designer and he handled all that. I just submitted the key lines. I was like, you do your thing, because I had no idea what to do color wise for it. So here's the OG.
Very cool. How many years have you been working with them then?
About 4. Actually, I have this right next to him. This is the first piece I did for them. Just another riff on the logo, the skull logo. So I did this, I think, like early 2020. This was actually the first band commission I ever did. This was just a t-shirt design. I think
they just reached out to you randomly, or how did that happen?
That actually, a friend of a friend, friend Heather lives in Seattle, and she used to work at an agency with him. He was like the creative director at the agency she worked at. And she was in town, and I was basically like, would like, because at the time I was only doing, that was like right after I'd left the brewery that I used to work for in Florida. Didn't really touch on that, but that's kind of how I got started, was doing can design and like bottle labels. That was like the first professional art thing I ever did.
What brewery in Tampa?
So I was living in St. Pete, and the brewery's in Bradenton, Florida, which is like 30 minutes south of St. Pete. It's called Motorworks.
Okay.
But so I used to do all their like can design and stuff. But I was basically just telling her that, working with bands is really what I was, interested in and wanted to kind of move in that direction. So basically just put us in touch, and he saw some of the stuff I'd done and dug it. And then just, did a riff on the skull logo, which is obviously super iconic. But that t-shirt design was the first official band thing I ever did. So I mean, they've been awesome to work with, and have now worked with them 3 times for the last several years. So it's been really cool, and it's been cool to kind of interpret this skull a couple different ways. And You know,
As your style changes too.
yeah, because it's funny. I mean, it's might have been hard to tell, but like the first school I did for them, and then this one, which I
They're
did
very different.
maybe middle of last year. Yeah, I mean, like very, very different rendering styles, for sure. I mean, I look at the first one now, and it's like, it's you know, all I see are flaws, and like I can't even put myself in that headspace of like drawing that way because I was still very much like trying to figure out what I was doing in ink. And yeah, very, very different approaches for sure. It's kind of cool to have them side by side and to see the change.
Definitely.
Um,
What
and
this on
then
the right?
yeah, the one on the right is just another personal piece, called the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Okay.
Um, yeah, just a big kind of ghastly jellyfish. There's like it's kind of hard to see, but there's some bones in there, and there's like some bells
Oh,
kind of
cool.
tucked in, like in the tentacles and all that stuff. Um, yeah, just just a fun personal piece, and just kind of keeping the kind of dark oceanic streak going. Um, yeah, so that's close up
I
at the
could see
original.
some of the bones.
You
Yeah.
see the bones and like barnacle bells. Basically, just I think I've been reading about like dead zones in the ocean and about how there's like areas of the ocean that are just like deplete of all life except for just like massive swarms of jellyfish, and they're
Hmm.
just kind of like just this idea of like a giant like ancient jellyfish kind of silently floating through the ocean with like these bells knolling was just like an interesting idea to me.
Yeah. It's really cool concept.
Knelling, not knolling. But yeah, and this one just took forever, but you know, it was just a personal piece, so I just took my time on it and just kind of worked on it when I could. But it was one of those things when I started rendering, like especially the top like dome or whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it, the crown of the jellyfish. I don't know what that's actually called, but when I started, I started so small with some of the marks, and I was just like, oh god, this is going to take forever. I was like, why? I was like, why did you start so small?
You did great with the depth and like three dimensionality, especially with that top part.
Thank
It's
you.
really cool.
Yeah, this was one where I was like, I mean, it's a small area, but trying to put in some deeper blacks. Tentatively, you know, dipping my toe in the water.
Oh, looks great.
No pun intended. But yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
I think that's the last one. Well,
Cool.
as we start to wrap up here, I think we touched on a lot of good things, man. And like
Yeah.
appreciate how open you are with like everything you feel good on and the things you want to like work on too. Like I think that's an important thing for people to hear is like we're all work in progress in terms of what we're trying to, you know, take our art to the next level. So I really liked hearing that from you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I just want to be open about stuff. I don't know. I feel like we kind of live in an era of like gurus and like so much feigned mastery, and like
Yeah.
I also think, especially with social media, there's this like pressure to like present mastery or you won't be taken seriously. And
Hmm.
like, I'm not a master of anything. Like I've gotten Instagram messages before and they're like, master, like, how did you do this like technique? This is masterful. I'm like, I've literally just, you know, it's all just trial and error. And like, I mean, dozens of pieces I've done that like nobody will ever see that got tossed. And then like, I mean, there's no sacrifice for just time and repetition. And that's really all it boils down to.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think as long as you're dedicated to continually learning and continually improving and, you know, have the discipline to back that up, I mean, you're going to improve. It's impossible not to. It's just, it just takes time, and you just have to be patient and just not get frustrated and quit. Cause that's, you know, I think the biggest thing is just not to quit,
Don't quit. Yeah.
because you're never going to achieve any level of skill in any pursuit if you stop. Obviously, I mean that sounds stupid and reductive, but you know, you look at people that are super accomplished in anything, and it's just like they're the ones that never stopped and didn't get discouraged and just, you know, stay true to just small incremental improvement, because that's really that's the only magic bullet or hack there is. You just have to put in a lot of time and just never stop doing it. So yeah, I never want to present like some false sense of mastery. I mean, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just dedicated. I mean, truly, I have no idea what I'm doing. Just dedicated to learning and remaining open and receptive to learning, and just, just trying to improve. And that's about all you can control. So,
yeah. Well, Eric, the end result of your work is awesome, dude. Thank you for your time, vulnerability, and of course, anybody tuning in, please follow Eric on Instagram. Keep up to date with whatever he's doing. If he sells any prints or if he decides to sell any originals, keep your eyes out for that. And for everybody, new episodes for the most part every week, every Thursday. That's what I aim to do. Like and subscribe if you don't mind, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee.